With the success of Resident Evil Village, it is no wonder that people are turning their eyes to the inevitable 9th entry in the mainline series. So let's have a fun discussion about things I would like to see in Resident Evil 9. Careful for spoilers if you have not yet played Resident Evil Village. Here are my top 10 things we need for Resident Evil 9. Number 10. Let's get right to it. With the way things ended for Ethan, I'd like to see him stay dead. I really enjoyed the direction they took him in and how they gave him a hero's ending. I don't want to see a Wesker twist from the first game where it turns out he didn't really die. The series as a whole seems to not want to kill main characters off, so the ending of Village was a nice change of pace, even if the post-credit scene leads us to believe Ethan could be alive. Number 9. An ending to Chris Redfield's story. Chris boulder punching Redfield has been a staple in the series since the first game. Even with Jill being more of a breakout character, Capcom seems to want to push Chris more and more into the spotlight. With Resident Evil 7 and Village now behind us, I'm 100% certain we will see Chris return in Part 9 as he is intertwined with the Winters family. With how the story progressed in Village, it leaves more questions than answers, and I would like to see his chapter come to a close as by the events of Village, he is close to 50 years old. Number 8. As I just mentioned, the ending to Village left us with a bunch of questions. One of which was the BSAA, Chris's former affiliation. By the events of Village, Chris had defected from the BSAA along with a group that he formed called the Hound Wolf Squad. And by the ending of the game, they had discovered that the BSAA had sent their forces to take care of the Megamycete and Miranda. Taking one of the BSAA soldiers captive and escaping via helicopter, Chris and his group discover the soldier was in fact a BOW, leaving us scratching our heads as to what happened to the BSAA. Number 7. A more involved villain. Part of the success in previous Resident Evil games was having a villain that had their hands in everything, whether it be Wesker or Spencer from the previous games. But since the death of Wesker and Spencer in Resident Evil 5, the series has turned into a villain of the week type of story. Villains who are typically forgettable or are just one-offs. Establishing a new overarching story villain would help with the storytelling moving forward. Don't get me wrong, I like my mommy milkers like the next person, but that doesn't keep the story going to the next game. Number 6. Returning back to horror. One of the reasons why Resident Evil 7 was as successful as it was due to how scary the game was. The setting and the atmosphere combined with Jack and the rest of the Baker family made for a truly horrifying experience. When it came to Village, however, Capcom decided to scale back the horror as they said Resident Evil 7 was too scary. Funny enough, everyone's favorite part of Resident Evil Village was the Benevento house, which was the scariest part of the game. Come on, Capcom, listen to us. Number 5. Not controlling Rose as the main character. While controlling a character with superpowers would be fun, it's also not something you would normally want in a game such as Resident Evil. That is more along the lines of Devil May Cry. The ending leaves us with a time skip and sees a grown-up Rose. Rose has powers similar to Evelyn from Resident Evil 7, but she alludes to having even more abilities. Relegating Rose to a side character would serve a better purpose to the story moving forward. Number 4. Claire Redfield. If Chris is expected to make a return, and if this could be his last game, I would like to see the return of Claire and potentially have it be the reverse situation from Code Veronica, with Claire coming to save her brother towards the end of the game. This would not only give us the brother-sister power duo again, but could also serve as a passing of the torch if they, want to keep it in the family. Number 3. Blue Umbrella. Ever since we saw the return of Umbrella in its new form in RE7, I wanted more story regarding the new organization that Chris put his trust into. Unfortunately, in Village, Blue Umbrella seemed to be absent, except for supplying the med injectors the Hound Wolf Squad was using. Number 2. The connections. Going back to the idea of having a more involved villain, the connections could fulfill that role. Being the behind-the-scenes villainous organization in Resident Evil 7, they were barely mentioned in Village without digging deep into the notes. The organization was involved with Miranda and informed her of Baby Rose. In RE7, they were responsible for the creation of Evelyn under the supervision of Miranda. And now, with Miranda dead, where does the organization go to from here? And before we get to the number one thing we need to see in Resident Evil 9, I want to thank you for being here and watching. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you guys are new for more content, and let's finish this. Number 1. The return of Jill Valentine and Sheva Alomar. The last we heard about Jill was very briefly in Revelations 2, where she helped convince Barry to join the BSAA. At that time, Jill was undergoing various tests due to her exposure to the various viruses from Wesker's experiments. Perhaps these tests lead to the creation of the BOWs the BSAA sends out during Village. Honestly, I could write a whole fanfiction theory on this, and I think I might do that, so stay tuned. As for Sheva, it would only make sense that Chris would contact her to give him information and act as a sort of spy as to what is going on in the BSAA since he defected and no longer trusts them. And since Sheva and Jill are fan favorites, it would make sense to bring them back for this next entry. On a side note, Jill could also be the one who trains Rose on how to control her powers. And there you go, my top 10 list for things that we need for Resident Evil 9. Have anything to add to the list? Feel free to sound off in the comment section. And until next time, don't lose your hands.
Ah, shit!